From militants who targeted places of worship to rampage unalivers who shot and unalived anyone who did not look like them, here are 20 neo-Nazis reacting to their life in prison sentences. In each of these cases, the judiciary made sure that the perpetrators knew that the law did not see color. Peyton Gendron.
I did a terrible thing that day. I shot and killed people because they were black. Looking back now, I can't believe I actually did it. I believed what I read online and acted out of hate. I know I can't take it back, but I wish I could.
The most shocking part about the Tops Friendly Markets shooting was the fact that the perpetrator, Peyton Spencer Gendron, was only 18 years old when he committed the senseless act. Peyton was an online streamer who had started consuming hateful content online. This included the Great Replacement Theory, a racist conspiracy theory that promoted segregation between ethnic groups and supported neo-Nazi beliefs. Peyton, as a young man, was easily influenced and soon decided to attack minority racial groups. So, on May 14, 2022, Peyton arrived at the Tops Friendly Markets, driving over 3 hours from his home in Conklin to the predominantly black neighborhood. He arrived wearing full tactical gear, body armor, and a helmet with a camera mounted on it to live-stream the attack. Peyton began firing indiscriminately at the crowd in the parking lot before he moved inside, where he unalived 10 people and injured 3 others. His victims ranged from a heroic retired police officer working as security to grandmothers and community activists. Before surrendering to police, he had even posted a 180-page manifesto online detailing his accelerationist neo-Nazi beliefs and his desire to spark a race war. His crime was sensational, with many coming together from all over the country to condemn Peyton and his beliefs. In 2023, Peyton's trial officially began, with the prosecution recalling the 10 people who had lost their lives on May 14th. Peyton's trial included testimonies from the victims' families, and, during one of the victims' sisters' testimonies, a man from the audience lunged at Peyton. He could not get past security to reach him, and the court ordered a recess, pausing the proceedings for 10 minutes. When Peyton was brought back in, the judge didn't hold back, telling him directly that there was no place for him or his hateful ideologies in a civilized society. Peyton eventually spoke, offering a low-voiced apology where he acknowledged he unalived people because they were black, but the families and the judge rejected the statement as a hollow performance. He was sentenced to 11 concurrent life sentences without the possibility of parole. In early 2024, the Department of Justice announced they would seek the capital penalty for his federal hate crime charges, meaning Peyton may still face execution despite New York State not having a capital penalty of its own. James Alex Fields, Jr.
But theoretically, he caused a lot of harm to the white supremacist movement. For that, I'm glad.
James Alex Fields was only 20 years old when he committed one of the worst hate crimes recorded in modern-day America. During Charlottesville's infamous Unite the Right rally in August 2017 and the counter-protests that occurred alongside them, James saw an opportunity to inflict maximum harm on innocent protesters. He had traveled all the way from Ohio to Virginia to participate in the rally, fueled by his long-standing adoration for Adolf Hitler and his white supremacist ideologies. In the heated exchange between the protesters and counter-protesters, James decided to deliberately accelerate his vehicle into the crowd, unaliving a 32-year-old woman, Heather Heyer, and causing life-altering injuries to over a dozen others. The impact was so violent that it sent bodies flying into the air, a horrific scene that was captured on multiple cameras and shocked the entire world. According to his defense attorneys, James did what he thought he needed to do out of fear. They claimed that he had a history of mental illness and that he was overwhelmed by the crowd's heated exchange. They pointed out that when a detective first informed him that he had unalived someone, James began to hyperventilate, crying and hitting himself in the head in a desperate display of self-pity. They alleged that he would have never participated in such a senseless act if he had not been overstimulated that evening. Obviously, the prosecution rejected this defense and claimed that James was a white nationalist and that his actions that day were deliberate. He had even sent a text message he sent to his mother featuring a photo of Hitler just before the attack. In June 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison on federal hate crime charges, which was quickly followed by a state sentencing of life plus 419 years. The judge made it clear that his actions were a calculated act of domestic terrorism that deserved the harshest possible penalty allowed by law. Brenton Tarrant. Brenton Harrison Tarrant had spent years traveling the world and radicalizing in dark corners of the internet, eventually publishing a 74-page manifesto that detailed his plan to remove the invaders and protect his race. On March 15, 2019, the 28-year-old Australian national entered 2 separate mosques during Friday prayers, armed with high-powered semi-automatic weapons that were covered in white supremacist slogans and names of neo-Nazi figures. He opened fire into the crowd of worshippers, unaliving 51 people and injuring 40 others. Worst still, he live-streamed the entire thing, as if it were a twisted game. And when he finally faced trial for his actions in August of 2020, he refused to apologize for any of it. Despite the fact that he had just committed one of the worst racially motivated mass shootings the modern world had seen, Brenton seemed like he was proud of what he had done. According to prosecutors, Brenton knew that after attacking the mosque, he would face trial, and that he had planned on using the courtroom as a platform to incite more hate. Fortunately, Brenton remained quiet during his trial. The judge called Brenton's actions inhuman and wicked before handing down a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. This was a historic moment. It was the first time in New Zealand's history that such a permanent sentence was delivered. Today, he remains in a maximum security facility, isolated from the world. Robert Bowers.
Today, 4.5 years in the making, a judge formally pronounced a sentence of death on Robert Bowers, who has been convicted in the killings of 11 worshipers from 3 congregations at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh on October 27, 2018.
In October of 2018, 46-year-old Robert Bowers decided he wanted to end the lives of minority ethnic groups, motivated by his lifelong hate for anyone who was not exactly like him. To inflict as much damage as he possibly could, Robert traveled all the way over to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to the Tree of Life Synagogue, one of the largest synagogues in the United States. He waited till the morning service, the Shabbat, before entering the building with sniper-grade rifles, 3 handguns, and tactical gear. In court, prosecutors claimed that Robert had all the makings of a racially motivated mass unaliver, and he claimed he would commit such a large-scale attack repeatedly. Robert had been highly active on extremist social media platforms where he posted anti-Semitic content and expressed a deep hatred for immigrants. During the shooting, he shouted that all Jewish people needed to be slain. By the time law enforcement engaged him in a gun battle and took him into custody, Robert had unalived 11 people, ranging in age from 54 to 97. It took the justice system nearly 5 years to prepare their case against Robert. They did not want him to get off on any legal loophole or technicality. The defense did not deny that Robert committed the shooting, but instead focused on his mental health in an attempt to avoid the ultimate penalty. However, the jury was shown his continued lack of remorse, noting that he had bragged to medical experts about the success of his mission while in custody. In August 2023, the jury reached a unanimous decision, and the judge sentenced Robert to the capital penalty for his crimes. Patrick Crusius.
If you didn't do what you did, I'd have my tower home.
In 2019, 21-year-old Patrick Crusius legally purchased a semi-automatic weapon and around 1,000 rounds of ammunition without anyone raising the alarm. On social media, Patrick presented himself as a neo-Nazi with strong anti-immigrant views. Just a few months later, on August 3, 2019, Patrick loaded his weapon in his vehicle, traveled over 1,000 kilometers away to El Paso, Texas, entered a Walmart, and began shooting at the crowd. His goal was to unalive anyone from the city's largely Latin American community. Patrick's attack lasted over several minutes and resulted in the unaliving of 23 people, along with 22 life-altering injuries. The shooting was described as the worst mass shooting against Latin Americans on United States soil in history. During interrogation, Patrick confessed to publishing a manifesto online just hours before the attack, titled The Inconvenient Truth. In the manifesto, he used his legal name, the weapon he would use, and the targets. He also promoted the white supremacist ideology, the Great Replacement. And while he used words used by Donald Trump in his presidential campaign, specifically against immigrants, Patrick noted that his beliefs predated Trump's run at the White House, and that he should not be blamed for Patrick's actions. Patrick also claimed that he was motivated to attack Brenton Tarrant's Christchurch shooting earlier that year. He waived his Miranda rights and freely admitted to the crime. Still, the defense tried to claim the insanity defense, but the prosecution disproved it instantly with Patrick's lifelong obsession with neo-Nazism. In 2023, Patrick was formally sentenced to 90 consecutive life terms. When asked if he regretted his actions, he nodded. Samuel Woodward.
To dig a grave in that terrain and bury and clean up and murder someone in an hour and a half. That is not someone who's just going, oh.
Friends and family members of Blaze Bernstein became increasingly concerned when the 19-year-old, who had gone out to meet a friend in Orange County, did not respond to their calls or texts. This was on January 2nd, 2018, and the family did not hear from Blaze for another 8 days. On January 10th, they received a call from police telling them that they had found the University of Pennsylvania's sophomore's body with over 20 stab wounds. 2 days later, his former high school classmate from Orange County School of the Arts, Samuel Woodward, was arrested. DNA evidence put him at the scene of the crime, but the real question was, why did Samuel unalive Blaze when he barely even knew him? In court, prosecutors argued that Samuel had actually been removed from the school after repeatedly making threats against homosexual students. He had continued his hateful views online and even joined the Atomwaffen Division, a neo-Nazi group linked to at least 8 unalivings. Because Blaze was both openly gay and Jewish, prosecutors alleged that this was a hate crime. According to Samuel's defense, he was a closeted homosexual who had unalived Blaze because of his homophobic upbringing, casting doubts on his orientation and leading to self-hatred. Also, the defense claimed that Blaze had shared messages between him and Samuel from Tinder to his friends, and that Samuel wanted to keep their relationship and communication private. However, the prosecution showed evidence that suggested Samuel was not homosexual and that he was only using dating profiles to bait gay men. He even bragged about baiting, luring, and then attacking another gay man a few days before unaliving Blaze. In 2024, nearly 6.5 years after the unaliving, Samuel was formally sentenced to life in prison. John Timothy Ernest.
2.5 years later, and Hannah Kay, whose mother, Lori Gilbert Kay, was murdered.
On April 27, 2019, exactly 6 months after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, John Timothy Ernest, a 19-year-old nursing student, entered the Chabad of Poway Synagogue in California. Just before the shooting, he posted a manifesto filled with neo-Nazi rhetoric and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, while also claiming responsibility for an unsolved arson at a nearby mosque weeks earlier. John entered the house of worship during the final day of Passover, armed with an AR-15-style rifle, and began firing into the lobby, unaliving 60-year-old Lori Gilbert Kay and injuring 3 others, including the congregation's rabbi and a young girl. The attack only ended because John's weapon jammed, preventing him from unaliving dozens more who were trapped inside. After fleeing the scene, he called 911 himself to report the crime, calmly telling the dispatcher that he had just opened fire at a synagogue because he believed he was protecting his race from Jewish people. He made no effort to apologize or look at the survivors he had traumatized. To avoid a potential capital sentence in the state case, John eventually pleaded guilty, which led to his sentencing in late 2021. He was handed a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years. He is currently serving his time in a federal facility, where he will remain for the rest of his natural life. Stefan Balliet. 27-year-old Stefan Balliet arrived at the gates of a local synagogue in Halle, Germany, determined to carry out a mass unaliving. He had armed himself with military-grade equipment, a camera to live stream the attack, and had chosen the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur to target the community. Stefan had planned on barricading the worshippers inside the synagogue as he opened fire and unalived everyone inside. However, he was stopped in his tracks when the heavy, reinforced wooden door of the synagogue would not budge. He tried to shoot at it and detonate a few explosives, but nothing worked. Frustrated by his failure, Stefan turned around and shot a woman walking by. He later unalived a man at a kebab shop. Throughout the live stream, he spouted anti-Semitic slurs and blamed the Jews for his own technical failures and the apparent decline of the West. His trial officially began in 2020, and Stefan used the courtroom as his personal stage, constantly interrupting the judge and attorneys to spew his hateful rhetoric. Despite the defense's claims that Stefan had not unalived anyone at the synagogue, The prosecution reminded everyone that he had every intention to commit an unaliving there. With his lack of remorse, the judge found it easy and befitting to sentence Stefan to a life behind bars. Thomas Mayer.
After tears inside court, her family spoke outside and said they don't hate her killer, they pity him.
The killing of Joe was a political act.
Thomas Alexander Mayer was a 53-year-old unemployed gardener with deep-seated neo-Nazi beliefs who committed a targeted assassination in West Yorkshire. On June 16, 2016, Thomas approached Member of Parliament Jo Cox outside a library in Birstall where she was meeting with constituents. He used a sawed-off .22 caliber rifle and a dagger to unalive her with 3 gunshot wounds and 15 stab wounds. During the incident, witnesses heard him shout, "Britain first." A search of his residence uncovered white supremacist books, Nazi memorabilia, and records of his long-term financial support for the National Alliance, a prominent American neo-Nazi organization. Thomas had researched his victim's political work and firearm details weeks before the attack. Because the crime was politically motivated, the case was handled under counter-terrorism protocols. Thomas provided no testimony in his own defense and remained silent as the prosecution detailed the forensic evidence against him. At his initial court appearance, when asked his name, he replied with the slogan, "No to traitors, freedom for Britain." In November 2016, he was found guilty of unaliving. The judge issued a whole-life order, a specific UK sentence that removes any possibility of parole, ensuring Thomas will remain incarcerated forever. Beate Zschäpe.
Surviving member of a neo-Nazi group blamed for a series of racist murders is on trial in Munich.
Beate Zschäpe was born in East Germany in 1975 and became active in the neo-Nazi skinhead scene in Jena, following the reunification of Germany. In the early 1990s, she met Uwe Mundlos and Uwe Bernhardt. By 1998, after police discovered a bomb-making workshop in a garage she had rented, Beate went underground with the 2 men to avoid arrest. Together, they formed the National Socialist Underground, or NSU, a terrorist cell dedicated to unaliving immigrants to purify the nation. Between 2000 and 2007, the NSU unalived 9 men of Turkish and Greek descent across various German cities, as well as a female police officer in Heilbronn. They also carried out 2 nail bombings in Cologne, which injured dozens of people. While Mundlos and Bernhardt carried out the physical attacks, Beate managed their multiple false identities and handled the group's finances, which they funded through 15 separate bank robberies during their 13 years as fugitives. Beate's time as a fugitive ended abruptly in November 2011, following a botched bank robbery in Eisenach. When police cornered Mundlos and Bernhardt in a getaway vehicle, the 2 men unalived themselves and set the van on fire. Upon hearing of their deaths, Beate set fire to their apartment in Zwickau to destroy evidence, and then traveled across Germany for several days. On November 8, 2011, she surrendered to a police station in Jena. She was charged with 10 counts of unaliving and arson, eventually receiving a sentence of life imprisonment. Dylan Roof.
Anyway, they saw it, but I just sat down because I guess they just didn't say anything, and then I was sitting there and I was like, just thinking about whether I should do it or not, and that's why I was sitting there for 15 minutes.
Dylan Storm Roof was a 21-year-old white supremacist who carried out a mass shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Dylan's background revealed a rapid radicalization through white supremacist websites. He had authored a manifesto titled The Last Rhodesian, which contained neo-Nazi symbols and outlined his belief that a race war was necessary. He entered the historic black church during a scheduled Wednesday night Bible study. He was invited to sit with the congregation and participated in the session for nearly an hour before he carried out the attack. Dylan had specifically targeted the church because of its status as one of the oldest black congregations in the United States. During the attack, he reportedly told one of the survivors that he was there to unalive black people because he believed they were taking over the country. Altogether, he unalived 9 people, including the senior pastor and state senator Clementa Pinckney. Following the shooting, he fled the scene but was apprehended the next day in North Carolina during a traffic stop. In late 2016, Dylan stood trial in federal court on 33 counts, including hate crimes. In January 2017, the jury reached a unanimous decision, and Dylan was sentenced to the capital penalty. In his closing arguments, He told the jury he did not regret his actions and felt he had to do it. Michael Hari.
Special Agent Joel Smith says he found 4 shotguns and 4 rifles. The weapons...
In August 2017, Michael, the 47-year-old leader of an Illinois-based anti-government militia group known as the White Rabbits, drove over 500 miles to Bloomington, Minnesota, to attack the Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center. They shattered a window and threw a pipe bomb into the imam's office during morning prayers. While the explosion shook the community and caused terror in the region and the Muslim community for some time, no one was unalived or injured as a result. Michael was promptly arrested, and it was soon revealed that he was a former sheriff's deputy who had turned into what he described as a libertarian. He planned to use the White Rabbits and their paramilitary activities to cleanse the nation. The prosecution also read out Michael's manifesto in the courtroom, where he made several Islamophobic comments and expressed his hatred for the religion. An FBI investigation linked the militia to other crimes, including the attempted bombing of an abortion clinic. Effectively, the group was declared a terrorist organization and disbanded. During the trial, Michael refused to acknowledge the court's authority. Finally, in 2021, he was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Given his age, he will spend the rest of his natural life locked up. Travis McMichael. On February 23, 2020, Travis McMichael observed a black man, Ahmaud Arbery, jogging through his neighborhood. Believing Ahmaud was responsible for recent local thefts, Travis and his father, Gregory, decided to take the law into their own hands. They armed themselves and pursued the jogger in their pickup truck. After a high-speed chase that involved cornering the victim with their vehicle, Travis exited the truck and engaged in a physical struggle with the unarmed man. During the altercation, Travis fired 3 close-range blasts, unaliving Ahmaud in the middle of the street while a neighbor recorded the incident on a cell phone. Ahmaud was a 25-year-old former high school football player who was known by his family and friends for his love of running. At the time of the confrontation, he was completely unarmed and wearing only jogging attire. Despite the perpetrator's claims that he was a criminal, investigators later confirmed that Ahmaud had not committed any thefts and was simply exercising in a public area. The person behind the trigger, Travis, was a former United States Coast Guard mechanic. While the defense argued the shooting was about crime prevention, the Department of Justice presented evidence of Travis's deep-seated racism. This included digital records of Travis using racial slurs to describe black people and a text message where he joked about unaliving black individuals. For over 2 months, no arrests were made until the video of the unaliving was leaked, leading to the appointment of a special prosecutor. The trial began in late 2021, when Travis took the stand to claim he acted in self-defense. However, the prosecution successfully argued that Travis was the initial aggressor who provoked the fight. In January 2022, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts, including unaliving. The judge sentenced Travis to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Benjamin Nathaniel Smith. Benjamin Smith was a part of the neo-Nazi movement known as the Creativity Movement. You might recognize the name because it is the organization started by yet another popular neo-Nazi and white supremacist, Matt Hale. Benjamin was one of Matt's disciples. Benjamin revered Matt, and when his legal license was revoked on July 2nd of 1999, Benjamin loaded his vehicle with guns and ammunition and went on a mass unaliving spree across Chicago. It started with a drive-by shooting at West Rogers Park, where Benjamin wounded 9 Orthodox Jews. He then unalived Ricky Birdsong, an African-American man, in front of his 3 children before unaliving a black pastor the next day. Benjamin then made his way to Indiana, where he shot and unalived a 26-year-old Korean student from the University of Indiana. He also tried to unalive 9 more people in the vicinity, but was unsuccessful as the police had started chasing him. Realizing that there was no way out of this mess and that if he was caught, he would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars, Benjamin shot himself twice in the head. Somehow, he survived and rammed his car into a metal post. He survived that too. But just as officers were approaching his vehicle, Benjamin shot himself in the heart, this time successfully unaliving himself. Jeremy Christian.
See you there, bitch. Yeah, okay. Go back to Tennessee too. What do I tell you? Go back to Tennessee too. We don't want you here. All your race baiting bullshit. You ain't gonna be married either, bitch.
On May 26, 2017, a 35-year-old man named Jeremy Joseph Christian boarded a Max Light rail train in Portland, Oregon, and just went off. Jeremy was a self-described white nationalist with a lengthy criminal record and a history of mental instability. He had previously been arrested for kidnapping and robbery and was well known to local activists for his aggressive behavior at political rallies. He started cursing out everyone on the train, pointing out the failed state of the nation and how people of different races and ethnic groups were corrupting the United States. Most of his tirade went unnoticed by the people who were just trying to get to where they needed to be, but Jeremy became increasingly hostile toward two black, teenage Muslim girls on the train. He started targeting them specifically, telling them to get out of the country and yelling anti-Muslim slurs against them. When several passengers stepped in to protect the girls and de-escalate the situation, Jeremy drew a 4-inch folding knife. In a span of just 11 seconds, he stabbed 3 men in their necks. The victims of the attack were Ricky Best, a 53-year-old Army veteran and father of 4, and Taliesin Namkai Meche, a 23-year-old recent college graduate. A third man, Micah Fletcher, was also stabbed but narrowly survived. The trial took place in early 2020 and was marked by Jeremy's frequent outbursts. He often shouted at the judge and victims' families, calling the proceedings a lynch mob. In June 2020, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 28 months. Curtis Alger. There is not an inch of skin left on Curtis Alger's face where he has not tattooed himself with neo-Nazi symbols. Today, the 46-year-old is serving life in prison at the Utah State Prison for the 2007 unaliving of correctional officer Stephen Anderson. But his criminal history goes back to 1998, when, at only 19 years old, Curtis had gotten mixed up in the wrong crowd, kickstarting his criminal career. In 2007, Curtis was serving a 100-month prison term when he subdued the corrections officer and shot him twice. Curtis was brought to the University of Utah for a medical examination, and during the scan, he had to be uncuffed. Curtis seized the opportunity, unalived the corrections officer, and then stole his vehicle. He was arrested a few miles away after attempting to unalive someone else, but his gun malfunctioned. The trial officially began in 2012, and while most defendants are given the right to defend themselves in court, the judge believed Curtis was misusing that right. He took his time to make frivolous claims, racist statements, and was often in contempt of court. The case gained widespread attention because Curtis had his entire face covered in white supremacist tattoos, something he was proud of. The judge, disgusted by his behavior, sentenced him to a lifetime behind bars without the possibility of parole. As of 2017, Curtis is fighting the charge. Wade Michael Page.
Totally devastated. His father is devastated. We're pretty much in shock.
In 2012, 40-year-old U.S. veteran Wade Page opened fire on a Sikh temple in Wisconsin. 6 people were unalived, 5 men and a woman, with their ages ranging from late 30s to early 80s. In the police encounter that followed, Wade turned the gun on himself and unalived himself before he could be arrested. But more so, he never gave a reasonable explanation for why he decided to commit the most gruesome unaliving against Sikhs on U.S. soil in history. From 1992 through 1998, Wade served in the U.S. military, but received a general discharge after he was found drunk on base one too many times. He then worked as a truck driver, but was fired from that role as well after being drunk on the job. To occupy himself, Wade had joined the Hammerskins, a neo-Nazi hate group based in Wisconsin. According to friends and family members, Wade had become a recluse, rarely left his home, and would not speak to anyone in the months leading up to the shooting. 4 out of the 6 victims were Indian nationals, sparking mass protests in India as well as the United States. President Barack Obama criticized Wade and apologized to the victims, but according to some Sikh analysts, this was not enough. They pointed out how the president had traveled to sites of other mass shootings, but never visited the Sikh temple. According to the Sikh American community, the incident did not receive significant media coverage like other racially motivated hate crimes. Anders Behring Breivik.
Unapologetic, Anders Breivik arrived in a makeshift court inside Cheyenne prison, demonstrating a continued belief in the far-right ideology.
The terror attacks in Norway on July 22, 2011 began with a massive fertilizer bomb detonated in Oslo's government quarter. The explosion unalived 8 people and caused extensive structural damage to the Prime Minister's office. While emergency services responded to the blast, the perpetrator traveled 30 kilometers to Utøya Island, where the Norwegian Labour Party was hosting a youth summer camp. Disguised as a police officer, he opened fire on the attendees, unaliving 69 people, the majority of whom were teenagers. The perpetrator was Anders Behring Breivik, a 32-year-old Norwegian national who had spent years planning the dual attacks. He was apprehended on the island by a special operations unit without further resistance. Investigation into his background revealed a history of radicalization through far-right online forums. Before the attacks, Anders distributed a 1,500-page manifesto detailing his neo-Nazi and anti-Islamic worldview. His stated motivation was to halt cultural Marxism and prevent a perceived white genocide by targeting the future leaders of the political party he blamed for liberal immigration policies. Anders insisted he was sane, desiring his crimes to be viewed as a political statement rather than the acts of a disordered mind. He showed no remorse during the trial, frequently using the courtroom to display extremist salutes. He was sentenced to 21 years of preventive detention. Under Norwegian law, this sentence can be extended by the court every 5 years if the prisoner is still considered a danger to the public, effectively ensuring he will remain in custody for the rest of his life. David Joey Pedersen. Along with his girlfriend, David embarked on a 10-day campaign of violence across Washington, Oregon, and California. The rampage began on September 26, when David unalived his own father and stepmother in their Everett, Washington, home. He then stole their vehicle and drove south, where he intercepted and unalived 19-year-old Cody Myers in Oregon because he believed the teenager was Jewish based on his name. The spree concluded in California with the unaliving of an African-American man named Reginald Clark. David was eventually apprehended by Oregon State Police after a high-speed chase and a standoff. The victims included his father, David "Red" Pedersen, and his stepmother, Leslie Pedersen, followed by Cody Myers and Reginald Clark. David had spent much of his adult life in and out of the prison system, where he became heavily radicalized. He was a known member of various white supremacist prison gangs and was covered in neo-Nazi tattoos, including a large swastika on his neck. David was sentenced to several life sentences without the possibility of parole. Frazier Glenn Miller Jr.
Also has some videos by people who are not familiar to you. They are familiar to me. And what's on these videos reflect what was on my mind at the time of April 13, 2014.
Frazier Glenn Miller Jr. was a 73-year-old former Ku Klux Klan leader. He was a self-proclaimed anti-Semite who had previously run for public office. On April 13, 2014, Frazier drove to the Jewish Community Center of Greater Kansas City and the nearby Village Shalom retirement home in Overland Park. Armed with a shotgun and a handgun, he opened fire on people in the parking lots of both locations. Ironically, all 3 of his victims were Christians. The victims included 69-year-old William Lewis Corporon and his 14-year-old grandson, Reet Griffin Underwood, who were at the community center for a singing audition. The third victim was 53-year-old Terry Lamano, who was unalived while visiting her mother at the retirement home. The prosecution pointed out that Frazier was the founder of the Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and later the White Patriot Party. The verdict was reached in August 2015, with the jury finding Frazier guilty on all counts. The judge formally handed down a capital sentence in November of that year, but while on Capitol Row, Frazier passed away from emphysema at the age of 80.